In this week's Beyond Bitcoin, we asked the question, where is the altcoin season we all anticipated? Why has Bitcoin dominance stayed so strong at 60% of the capitalization of the market? And what role has the 35 million meme coins played in this change in altcoin cycle? Don't forget, like, subscribe, and support us, support you on this journey into the amazing new asset class that is crypto. Good morning and welcome along to another episode of Beyond Bitcoin. My name is Deryck and with me today is Galton, our senior analyst. Hello, Greg. How are you going?
GM Deryck. Good morning to everyone.
Now, of course, it's always been a big week. Every week's a big week, despite the fact that people are complaining there's not enough action in crypto at the moment. In other words, really, there's not enough volatility because the crypto world is so used to having volatility, which they can trade within, speculate on, and get excited about talking about. But let's just talk about a couple of things that maybe are slowing that volatility down. On the good news front, particularly, is the US Crypto Task Force is focusing on delivering its national Bitcoin reserve. Strategic Bitcoin Reserve is regularly referred to SBR. And there's even some discussions from Bernstein, who heads this, that it could issue debt or even sell some gold to buy cryptocurrency purchases. I wonder what that would do to the gold market to see gold getting sold to purchase Bitcoin. It'd be quite fascinating. But one of the things that's happening amongst this is that the Bitcoin dominance, and that is therefore the capitalization of Bitcoin versus the remainder altcoins in the market, is sitting at around that 60% mark. It's very high. There seems to be a view that the Bitcoin future is strong. There's a lot of interest in both institutional investors, strategic reserves, treasuries, etc., investing in it. Its path forward looks strong. And at the same time, we're seeing things like the alternative market, the altcoins, simply maybe not having the season at all, whether it's fouled or it's just simply delayed. And people are speculating it's because Bitcoin dominance still remains so strong. They're speculating that the market liquidity constraints are still there. So in other words, there's not a lot of liquidity going through the market. And Greg, we saw that when the Trump token was launched. And all of a sudden we saw money not coming into the market as much, but drawing from altcoins, which we would argue have valid use cases and solid technology. So not a lot of market liquidity. Macroeconomics is still a bit anxious at the moment. What's going to happen with the up and coming, still a bit anxious at the moment. What's going to become of the global liquidity with the up and coming tariffs that President Trump and Vice President Elon Musk are putting into place. And so that's causing uncertainty there. Another is, in fact, really for Bitcoin to be stronger. And then there's regulatory uncertainty around altcoins, which is we're getting real clarity on Bitcoin being a stable asset, hedge against inflation, something that the major institutions are now looking towards entering as part of their portfolio, but we're not hearing that language around altcoins. And then, of course, there's the elephant in the room, Greg, and that is there's 35 million meme coins out there now. Last time we talked about 11.5 million, which is the number that CoinMarketCap quoted. But in fact, there's 35 million meme coins that are at the very least muddying or clouding the view of altcoins that have got solid use cases. Will we see another altcoin season where all ships rise on a rising tide? Greg, what do you think?
Well, there's a lot to unpack there, Deryck. But yeah, I think it's an interesting question that the market is asking itself at the moment. When the last sort of alt seasons that we had, there were far less number of tokens out there to capture mind share. There was a couple of memes. Dogecoin obviously is the most successful, still very large. But there was proper protocols being released that at least pretended, if even if they didn't have some sort of utility to them, that came about through the sort of the ICO and the TGE, the token generation event process. So that really sort of had people sort of focusing on all of these smart contract platforms, etc., that were coming out. This time around, we've just had a proliferation of meme coins. It's mainly been on Solana, and it's mainly because it's so cheap to create a meme coin. You can do it in 15 minutes. There's the Pump.fun platform that enables almost anyone to do it, and it's so cheap and easy that at one stage, I think we talked about a while ago, there was about 21,000 meme coins a day being launched on Solana. That's why we've got 35 million. A lot of those are dead, have been rug pulled. There's no liquidity. You can't trade in them. Tiny market caps. But at some point in time, they've sucked a huge amount of liquidity out of the market, and they've given it to the developer or the insiders, whether it's been mainly through a rug pull or simply that value's just been fallen away because the interest in that meme has just fallen away, typically within hours of it being launched. So there's studies that show that every dollar that gets invested in a meme coin means there's not a dollar to be invested in what we call a real protocol, a genuine Web3, layer 2, layer 3 sort of protocol that's actually trying to take the cryptocurrency space forward. And I guess, it's worth emphasizing that the crypto industry has worked so hard over the years to gain legitimacy with the regulators and with the politicians and with the public about the potential for blockchain and the blockchain use across business, that this sort of growing gambling, casino type grifting approach is really hurting crypto's view in I think in terms of how the regulators view it, but also in terms of how the public view it. And so that's just still such a something that is still frustrating to be going through at this moment in time when we see the potential for Bitcoin and we see the talk of strategic Bitcoin reserves, and governments talking about selling off their gold to buy Bitcoin. That's a huge transitional shift over the last 2,000 years. That's an admission that we finally found an asset that's better than gold as a store of value. That's an admission of that. It's digital property you can put in your pocket. We've got on that hand, and then you've got on the other hand, it's just a big casino. Well, which it is. So it's incredibly frustrating, I think, from our point of view as sort of professional investors in the market, that we're still sort of going through this issue. And I think, the sentiment on crypto Twitter at the moment is it's the lowest it's ever been. It's probably lower than it was around the time of Luna and Celsius and FTX. Just because there's so much exhaustion with the number of rug pulls and the frustration and the fundamental tokens are sort of taking a beating, and what you're seeing now is you're seeing a reallocation back to Bitcoin. The Bitcoin maxis are sort of saying, well, we told you all along. So that's the way things are playing out right now.
Look, there's a huge rift between the current kind of retail geeks that exist on or the degens, as we otherwise would call them, that exist on Twitter. And I call them a little bit that because clearly they're not institutional investors. They might be large holders, and they're not necessarily little retail either, which is not maybe on Twitter constantly gossiping about what's happening. So these are the fairly well-informed, active members of the crypto community that are communicating mostly on Twitter. And yes, they're not happy. They're very disappointed that the alt season hasn't arrived. But what's interesting, at the same time, we've never seen institutional support, investment and encouragement and engagement and initiatives like we have in the past. The institutions establishing themselves as the tokenization of real-world asset avenues and centers. They're establishing themselves as ETF centers where they can start trading some of these larger alt tokens that are there. And of course, they've already established the Bitcoin ETFs. And they're looking for use cases that their company, corporation, business offering services can utilize. This just didn't happen a couple of years ago. Yet this is very positive in regards to the true use of digital assets. And not is it positive, I think, but it is not a speculative position. They are engaged. They will continue to be engaged. They'll continue to grow. They're getting safety from regulations that are coming, and they're seeing opportunity to actually generate returns. That's massively positive. Meanwhile, number doesn't go up. And and crypto degen, fair enough, are annoyed with that. But I think it's important for the listening audience to understand there are two sections happening here. And that is institutions are adopting digital assets and alt with solid use cases with them, whereas the price of the tokens aren't rising to the same level that people would want. But the season has changed. And what used to be various speculations that you've seen in the previous 4 seasons are there now, but this time it's causing damage, in my view. So what do you think? Here we are. So 2017, we saw the ICO boom. And wow, were there some scams in that? But wow, that was the beginning of so many of the important decentralized finance tokens that were created. And that was the beginning of like the dot-com boom that saw the beginning of the internet. It was an important period of time with a lot of nonsense in it at the same time. And then now 4 years later, in 2021, we did see the DeFi season come on board. And we saw the extraordinary opportunity that it was wrapped around decentralized finance, maybe replacing a lot of the functions of banks. And so obviously always exuberance, it's going to happen tomorrow. It didn't, but it is still moving forward at an extraordinary rate. And DeFi has actually proven to be a very solid environment. Jump forward another 4 years, and here we are in 2025, and it's meme coins that have come out. But the difference in dynamics of meme coins is they're getting pumped out by the millions, now tens of millions of them. And that doesn't seem to have, that's created a meme coin boom temporarily, but it hasn't created an uplift for the entire industry. In fact, the industry is getting tarnished with what meme coins are. So, Greg, there's sentiment, which is we're disappointed, meme coins are annoying. And then there's reality, and that is the altcoins with use cases, and the institutions are now starting to adopt this new technology to them and build upon it. How does one separate themselves from sentiment and reality, Greg?
Yeah, well, it's an interesting point that you make, Deryck. I mean, a lot of those protocols that 2017, obviously ETH was the biggest one amongst them. You had the likes of Cardano, you had the likes of Polkadot. You had a huge raft of protocols that were released. And then you had the growth in DeFi, as you say, which was done on those chains. So that was the progression that those chains took forward 4 years later, that you saw that growth. What we should be seeing now is we should be seeing DeFi combined with AI. That is the next progression that we should be doing, where it should be able to really, replace a lot of the traditional funds management industry. A lot of these things, tokenization of real world assets, a lot of these things can be brought on chain and be made accessible to anyone in the world that has a mobile and a connection to the internet. It's it's the decentralization of finance, which is obviously what DeFi is all about.
Yes.
That's where we should be. We should be looking down that barrel of real world assets, tokenizing everything. Instead, we're talking about, Libra coin, backed by the Argentinian president, Trump, Melania tokens. Yeah. These are all, being driven by grifters and key opinion leaders that are pumping these things up. People are buying them for greed, and it's just turned into a massive overnight casino. That's not to say it hasn't been a casino ever in the past, but we thought we'd got past that phase of the ICO boom, and now we're into the meme coin boom. It's just so incredibly frustrating. But I think what you can do there is don't get the FOMO, the fear of missing out. You will hear stories about people making millions overnight on these meme coins. Most of those people, if not 100% of those people, are insiders.
Yes.
They are friends with the developer that's doing the launch. Yes. They get tokens a few seconds before they launch. If you're trying to follow it on Telegram or Discord or Twitter and trying to pick the next thing that's coming through, you will get burnt. You might make a small amount of money, but more often than not, you will lose out as a result because you're not on the inside. So if you're hearing about a token, remember that you are the exit liquidity for someone who's selling to you. Just keep that in mind. So
that's right.
I would tend to focus very much, and obviously, in terms of not being able to give financial advice, but look for those bigger quality tokens. There's a good reason that Bitcoin still has a market dominance of 60%. because you are seeing a reallocation back to the safest, the best asset in the world, not just in crypto, but potentially in the world. Akin to what US Treasury securities were back last century, we think Bitcoin could be the ultimate store of value, the soundest, safest sort of currency going forward. So we would certainly have a position there. And then, look at some of these other protocols as well. Ethereum's been struggling. The layer 2s are probably eating Ethereum's lunch at the moment. Ethereum has now potentially gone inflationary with its token burn is now less than the amount of tokens it emits for staking. Solana's coming under pressure because that's where all the meme tokens are being launched, and we are seeing a slowdown in meme token launches in the most recent couple of days. But there are other protocols that are emerging. But we've talked about this before. We see the value in the DeFi applications, on the applications that sit on these layer 1 blockchains.
Yeah.
That's where the value lies. These things are typically trading at a tenth of the implied value of Ethereum and Solana. So I'd be looking at those sort of tokens on DeFi applications, on wallet on market aggregators, those sort of different areas, DeFi protocols that actually do have utility, do bring value, and are currently undervalued in the marketplace because the market's not giving them the fair value for them. And I think as we move forward and more institutions come into this market, there'll be better analysis. That's one thing we've always sort of looked for, better valuations, better analysis. And these tokens will eventually be recognised by the market and valued accordingly.
So the interesting thing then is, a summation, is that our view is that all ships are unlikely to arise on a rising tide for the next coin season. There may not be a season as we knew it in the past, which traditionally saw profits coming out of Bitcoin, rolling into altcoin, speculating and then exiting. And so that being the case, in some ways, we're retreating from that period of ignorant exuberance, and we're starting to get to a point where analysis plays a major role. In other words, the likes of Greg Galton's and many others that are specialists in this industry are starting to look at the alt tokens and say, right, this DeFi token has a solid use case, good development team, capitalized, known within the industry. We think it's the next token relating to AI and DeFi or whatever it happens to be. In other words, we're analyzing and we're picking the very best of these assets to move forward. This, in fact, is starting to become a normal way to invest into the space or into any investment class. So I think it's a good thing in that regard. But it's important for the audience to understand that meme coins have eventuated because the technology has enabled them to be produced en masse. The likes of Solana has enabled very cheap transactions to occur, and all these things have lined up for it to occur. A little bit like the 2017 ICO bull run was created because Ethereum, which was developed and released in, I think, 2015 in this case, really became the golden-haired child that says, this is what you can do with smart contracts. And then everyone started building smart contracts, nearly always on Ethereum, back in that 2017 boom. Now we're seeing meme coins getting developed on Solana. So you can see how, as a technology's developed, human beings jump in and they exploit it, they create whatever they can out of it, and they generate returns. So I think to semi-end this, one would argue that one of the sort of standout meme coins for this year would be the Trump coin. And let's just look at that for a moment, right? So the Trump coin hit a peak of $70 on the 19th of the 1st. And now it's sitting at $17. So for those that have rushed in to buy Trump at $70, they'll be sorely unhappy. Its market capitalization at the moment is $3.4 billion, but its fully diluted value is sitting at $17 billion. And who owns the remainder of that fully diluted value? Most of it's owned by Trump Corporation tokens. So really, if you think that some of the very biggest tokens are legitimate, I think you can probably see the makings of kind of a grift token, even with the major Trump token there. And so when you're starting to get down to small capitalization tokens, you're really getting to a point where you're saying, really, give me a valid use case. So, Greg, there's probably 2 or 3 standouts. Dogecoin has got to be one of them because it's been around for a long time. It's well supported by a celebrity. But outside that, it's getting back to the basics. What is the use of the token? So, the takeaway is investor beware. Meme coins are fun for speculating. They've played a role. They've impacted the altcoin season, and possibly they've made the altcoin season become a little bit more mature with professionals now investing in the altcoins that have got solid user cases. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think a lot of it reminds me of the tech boom in 2000, to be honest, when, suddenly, we had the internet and suddenly people realized that they could launch applications and make money off the internet, but they weren't really sure how they were going to do it. So yes. You saw a lot of speculative fervor. I remember being in Perth at the time, and we had a lot of mining company CEOs telling us they were going to convert from a mining company, a junior explorer into an internet company, and they couldn't even use their laptop to update their presentation. There was a lot of, fluff and a lot of, no one really knew what was happening. They all knew it was a massive opportunity. They all wanted to get in on it. And that's, I kind of feel like that's what we're experiencing at the moment. Ultimately, from that tech boom, there was a number of really successful companies that came out of it. We don't need to mention the likes of the Amazons and the Facebooks and the Metas, but so Meta and the Alphabet and all of those that came out. But there was a lot that failed by the wayside, a lot that disappeared, that had didn't really have a business model. So there will be winners and losers. We've talked about before about layer ones. We think layer ones will be the layer ones will compete the returns away to such a low level that they're basically operating like a utility, and the real value will be in the DeFi applications, or the applications that the artificial intelligence, the real world assets, the asset tokenization businesses. That will be where the real value lies for investors, and those are the gems to be looking for.
That's right. The arrival of Web 3.0. Thank you, Greg. Look forward to catching up again very soon. And I think next week we've got Nitin Gower coming in from the US, and he's outlining what he's been doing at some of the conferences and his take on what's happening in this industry at the moment. Until then, bye for now.